Hi, welcome to the video. So this is the first part in a series I'm doing on diatonic scales. A diatonic scale is just your 7-note major and minor scales that fit in your standard keys. Now, the goal of this will be, I will walk you through individual positions, but then we'll start combining those together, and eventually you'll be able to play in one key across the entire neck. So if I start up here in the Mixolydian position, I don't even have to think about the position. I can move to my minor, my locrian, my Dorian, and wherever I want while I'm improvising and not get lost on. And that's what I want you to be able to do by the end. You can play whatever genre you want, but it'll move fluidly from one position to another. Now, when I'm saying a key, the difference between a scale and a key, if I play a C major scale, that's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. It doesn't matter what fingering I use, that's still a C major scale. Now, the key is, in fact, for example, in the key of C major, the white keys on piano would be the key of C major. The black keys would be sharps and flats. So anything you can play in the white keys would be in the key of C major. Doesn't matter what note you start on, doesn't matter which of those notes you combine. So on guitar, if you think about, you've got 7 different notes. If I can create a scale off each one of those 7 notes, a chord off each one of those, arpeggio, as long as I don't use any sharps or flats, which would go outside of the key of C major, I'm still in the key. Okay, so when I'm teaching these different positions, for example, the first one I'm going to teach you is A minor. They all contain every other mode within them. So if you hear these names like Mixolydian, Dorian, Phrygian, they all exist within every position. So even though I'm calling this A minor, I might be thinking of it as C major or anything else. So the name doesn't really matter that much. It's just a way to keep track of which position we're playing. You're not necessarily playing a G Mixolydian just because you learned the G Mixolydian position. You're probably still playing a C major or A minor just in the Mixolydian position. Okay, so let me go ahead and get into the actual scale fingering, and then I'll get into more details of picking, figuring all that. You can download the sheet, which has both a fingerboard diagram with the notes and shape of it, and also tab and some exercises to get you better at. I also wrote down picking for both alternate and economy picking, which I'll get into, and fingering with a couple different options on some of them. So the reason I'm teaching A minor first is a lot of you probably have already done minor pentatonic. So if you've already done this scale, you just have to add the B note and F note in each octave, and then you'll have your natural minor scale. And I'll get into the names in a second. If you haven't done pentatonic, I'll go ahead and leave a link up there, and I recommend that's a good starting point. Even if you're interested in diatonic, you get the pentatonic down too. Okay, so when you're playing the scale, this is A minor. The first thing I want you to do is just really make sure you're getting clean notes on everything. So really get your finger placement next to the frets, not on top of them, so there's no buzzing. Keep your fingers down when you're ascending, so you don't pick up the finger, because I don't want there to be a cut off where there's not a note going. So you want one note ringing until the next one. When you switch strings, same thing. I want this note to keep ringing till the next note starts. So don't do this where you and then you set your fingers, because there's going to be a pause. Keep this ringing out till you play the next note. So there's never a pause between the string changes. You always sustain the notes. Okay, so let me go and demonstrate this descending. Now when I'm ascending and descending this, I can either, when I get to the top, hit that note again, or most of the time, in the way I tabbed it out, is I'm just going to hit it once and then reverse directions. Let me go into the names of the scale. So this has multiple different names. A lot of times you'll just call it A minor, and that's perfectly fine because people will assume you mean this scale. But technically, in the key, there's 4 minor scales and 3 major scales. But if you just say C major, people will know you mean that main scale for the key. And if you say A minor, that's what's considered the relative minor of the key, or related minor of it. So that's one of the names of this, is you could call this a relative minor. And that would usually be used in context of saying I'm playing in the A relative minor of the key of C major, for example. Now I could use the modal name, the names like Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian. This would be this fingering would be called aeolian if I'm thinking of it in that way. That's if I want to be more specific on and talk about modes and stuff, and I want you to really know which mode I mean on it. It can also be called natural minor. Oftentimes that's used in the context of differentiating between the harmonic, melodic, and natural minor, which are kind of the three primary minors outside of the different modes and stuff. So natural minor, relative minor, aeolian, or just call it minor. Any of those are fine for this scale. Okay, now let me get into some other details on the fingering. So when I go to this part, I use first and third finger when I'm ascending, but when I descend I use second and fourth. And the reason for that, if you notice there's a position shift, I'm staying in the position I'm coming from until I need to shift, because I might be playing like here, and then I might want to come back to this position above it. So if I switch to the fingering for the next position I'm going to, I won't be able to return back to those notes I just came from. Same thing's true here. Here I'm in this fourth fret position versus the fifth fret. And I might want to return back to these notes. So until I need to shift, I'm going to use fingers in the position I'm in. And then when I need to shift, I will switch to that. Now when you start improvising, you might do slides and other things that kind of muddy your waters, and you're not always sticking to one fingering. But at first, practice it the way I'm showing, and then when you're actually improvising, you do what gives you the sound you want. For example, another thing of keeping in the position, if I'm playing these notes, and I'm improvising, I'm just going to hit this one note and come back. I'm not going to go this finger. I'm not going to shift into a new position. So in that case, I might, if I do want to shift back, just slide that because I'm already in this position here. So that's perfectly okay. But if you're just running through a scale, I'd recommend mostly just using the separate fingers like that and leave the sliding for when you're improvising. And then you can do whatever you want on it. Okay. Another thing to think of when you're picking, we're going to talk about that now. So there's two basic ways you can do it: alternate picking or economy picking. If you haven't heard of those, I'd recommend maybe watching this video. I've actually got a couple ones, one on strict economy picking versus standard, and the one I'm going to link is alternate picking compared to economy picking. But the basic quick rundown of the differences. Alternate picking, I'm always just alternating. If I did a downstroke, I'm going to do up. If I did up, I'm going to do it down. So if I'm on the same string and I do down, next note's up. If I go into a string under it, I did it down, the next one would be up. If I'm going a string above it, I did it down here, next one's going to be up. So wherever I'm going, the down is always followed by an up. Now with the economy picking, the economy name comes from economy of motion. You're trying to do something more efficient. So you're doing what's called little mini sweeps, which is when you go the same direction. For example, often done in arpeggios where I maybe use a series of downstrokes because that's the direction my hand's moving. So it's more efficient than stopping it in alternating. Same thing on economy picking a scale. I'm going the direction of the next string. So if I'm going to a string under it, I'm going to be doing a downstroke going to that. If I'm going above it, I'm doing an upstroke. Now, in practice though, unless you're sticking very strictly to it, if I'm on downstroke here, I'm going to one under it. It allows me to do that little sweep into two downstrokes in a row. But if I'm on downstroke and I'm going a string above it, even I will still do an upstroke, but it will basically be alternate picking. It's only if I was on upstroke here, and then you can do two in a row and get that little mini sweep in there. So I guess the point is, most economy picking is still alternate picking, and you'll see that in the comparison here. The alternate picking is the one closest to a tab, and the economy picking is above that. You'll see two downstrokes in a row, or on the way up, two upstrokes in a row. But most of it's still alternating. So if you want to start off with alternating, I would say that's a good thing to do because it gives you consistency. You don't have to think about the picking so much. Personally, I'm going to be demonstrating this in economy picking because that's the way I do it, but I started off, it wasn't until I got to G.I.T. and I'd already been playing for years Then I switched to economy picking. I was doing the alternate picking before that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get more into how to get better with this. So really, it's important to kind of isolate anything that's difficult. So the difficulty on this, I would say, is the shift and the shift, and to a lesser extent, the switch from the 1-2-4 to 1-3-4. So I'd really isolate some of those areas. So on this bottom line, I wrote just ascending or descending, those main two difficulties. So I'm just going to start here on the 7. I could start up, down, down, if I'm doing economy picking, but I could also just do it alternate picking, down, up. I do it both ways because I don't think I can ever count on my pick going a certain direction. So I think it's perfectly fine, even if you economy pick, to get the alternate picking option down too. But so I'm just going to get that down, go slow, get comfortable with it, and then try the other direction. Okay, so same thing down here. Just get this down, and then get another one. Now on here you could go down, up, down, up, down, up, or you could go up, down, up, down, up. Again, depending on what you want to work on. Then you can put these in a more of a continuous fashion, like that. And I wrote down this as an example, just isolating those top 3 strings, which gives you that shift and that finger change on it. So that was written here, and then the more isolated, just ascending or descending here, this gives you the whole shape up here. Now up here, the reason I'm using the note names on that instead of just dots like a lot of people do is I want you to be able to understand what notes you're playing, but don't worry about memorizing those at first. At first, just memorize the shape. But once you got the shape down, you can start thinking about, okay, maybe I want to target an A note because, or the notes from an A minor chord, all of them, which is A, C, and E. And then if you look at my videos where I do chords, instead of dots, I also use the names of the notes. So then you can see what notes are in the chord, reference that to the scale, find that A, C, E, which will be the notes of arpeggio, but also can be your target notes, so I can then emphasize that A note. And then emphasize the E note, or the C note when I'm playing over that A minor chord, which has A, C, and E in it. So that's why I'm using the notes. You can really kind of understand it better. It's also a good way to start to learn the notes on the neck. I did a couple of videos on that. I'll put a link in the corner too, which we'll put in the description. First one was on finding the notes on the neck, second one was on how to apply it. So at first, just memorize the shape, because that will always stay the same no matter what key you're in. The notes, of course, if we change their key, the notes will be different. Okay, so another thing, when to add in like a metronome. A lot of people are told to add a metronome right away. I don't think that's a good idea, honestly, because you really need to get one thing down at a time and get good with that. Otherwise, you're multitasking. You're just going to be, too spread too thin. So if you're not getting a clean note when you're playing these, if you're forgetting what the notes are when you're playing through them, if you're making mistakes with your picking and your synchronization, don't put metronome in. It's just one more thing you're going to have to think about, and it will distract you from concentrating on the more important things, which right now, if you're not getting clean notes, that's number one. Then getting consistency with your fingers, memorization, and with your pick, I'd say is number 2. Then you can work on making sure you're in time on it. And you can do that from then on at that, and go ahead and play these as maybe starting off as chord notes, so 1 note per beat, or 8th notes going 1 and 2 and doing 2 notes per beat, and eventually triplets, 16th notes, etc. Okay, the same thing kind of about that multitasking is, I don't want you moving on to the next scale until you really feel comfortable with this one. Because if you, again, you're going to spread yourself too thin. If you're really good at one scale, then you can start using that in your soloing, your improvising, you'll start recognizing it in songs. And then you add another one, and you keep moving through so that you can actually use them. I see people come in for private lesson stuff, they maybe know like 5-6 scales across the neck, but they can't improvise in any of them. It's like, you're better off having one that you can actually use than 6 that you can't use. They're just finger exercises. So the way you test yourself, if you can't put your finger down on any string and know either ascending or descending where to go from that without having to stop and think about it too much, you should be able to just place it down and then be able to play from it. You should be able to skip a string or notes and not get lost. You should be able to change directions and not get lost. Not necessarily at the speed. You can go so slow speed, but if you're getting lost when you're trying to do simple improvisations, changing directions, skipping strings, starting at different points. And we go ahead and link another video on improvising exercises up, which you can work into these two. Then don't move on. Once you can kind of do some basic moving around without getting lost like that, then we'll learn one of the adjacent ones, and that will be my next video, is learning adjacent scales. We'll start with this major or low Korean position. So I think we'll leave it at that for this time. Again, download this on my Patreon page. It's always free and open to the public. Link is in the description. And I'll see you for the next video. Please like and subscribe, share, comment, any of that things. Thanks.